What if I told you that God was dead? You might think that's blasphemous, but it was German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche who first proclaimed these words in 1882, and he didn't mean that God literally kicked the bucket. Rather, he was saying that people have stopped believing in God and therefore God is dead to us. But Nietzsche didn't just say that God is dead and move on with his day. He realized the radical implications of such a statement and spent the rest of his career grappling with what it means for humanity when we stop believing in a higher power. In this video, we'll try to grapple with Nietzsche's ideas as well. So let's get into it. Nietzsche was born in 1844 in the German state of Prussia. When he was 5 years old, his father, who was a Lutheran minister, died, leaving Nietzsche and his family in financial hardship. His mother then moved with her to surviving children to Basel in Switzerland, where she remarried. Though Nietzsche excelled at school, he suffered from poor health throughout his life, likely due to migraines and syphilis, which may have also contributed to his bouts of depression. At 18, he began attending the University of Bonn to study philology, the study of literature, which eventually led him to philosophy. It was here he first encountered the works of Arthur Schopenhauer, whose pessimistic philosophy deeply influenced him. Upon graduating university, Nietzsche became a philologist at the age of 24. However, he resigned from his position 2 years later after having a nervous breakdown caused by overwork and the death of his mother. This event marked a significant turning point in Nietzsche's life, leading him to question traditional morality and religion, which had previously been cornerstones of Western civilization. Over the next decade, he wrote several books, including The Birth of Tragedy, Twilight of the Idols, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, all of which were informed by his experiences. Throughout these writings, Nietzsche explored themes of morality, religion, art, and culture, often employing aphoristic and poetic language to convey his ideas. After having another psychotic episode, this time brought on by the heat and his own volatile emotions, Nietzsche's sister Elizabeth sent him to a mental asylum. He remained there until 1900 when he suffered a final stroke, which left him paralyzed and unable to speak. He died in 1900 at the age of 55. But what did Nietzsche actually mean when he said that God is dead? The phrase appears in one of his early works, The Gay Science, where Nietzsche uses the metaphor of a hammer to explain the impact of scientific thinking on religious belief. Just as the hammer has replaced the nail as the primary tool for building, so too has science replaced religion as the guiding force in our lives. People no longer look to God or religious texts for answers, but instead rely on reason and evidence to understand the world around them. This shift away from religion toward science and rationalism began in the West during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, which challenged traditional religious beliefs and practices and emphasized the importance of human reason and empirical evidence. With the advent of modern science, which provided natural explanations for phenomena once attributed to divine intervention, religious belief began to decline in Europe. Nietzsche argued that this decline had profound implications for human beings, who had traditionally found meaning and purpose in their relationship with God. Without God, humans were now free to create their own values and meaning. Nietzsche recognized both the possibilities and dangers of this new situation. On the one hand, it allowed for greater individual freedom and creativity. On the other hand, it risked nihilism, the belief that life is meaningless. Another way to interpret the death of God is to see it as an internal process that occurs within individuals rather than a societal or historical development. For example, someone who grows up in a religious household may reject their faith as they mature and become exposed to different ideas and perspectives. In this case, the death of God represents not the death of a literal deity, but rather the death of one's faith and belief in a higher power. Nietzsche explored this idea in his book Twilight of the Idols, in which he uses the metaphor of a star to represent God. Just as a star may appear to disappear from view, but is still present in the sky, so too may God be hidden from human perception, but continue to exist in some other realm. Nietzsche was not the first thinker to ponder the problem of evil. The problem of evil is a philosophical argument against the existence of an all-knowing, all-powerful and benevolent God. If God has knowledge of all things and has the power and desire to prevent suffering, why does evil and suffering exist? Different religions and individuals have offered various responses to this problem. Some argue that suffering is necessary for spiritual growth, while others suggest that it serves a greater divine purpose. However, Nietzsche rejected these traditional responses and instead proposed a radical solution. In his view, the death of God meant that humans could no longer rely on traditional sources of meaning and value, and instead had to confront the reality of existence without God. By doing so, humans would be able to create their own values and live more authentically. In addition to these interpretations, some scholars argue that Nietzsche's statement should not be taken literally as a declaration that God has actually died. Instead, it can be read as a provocative way of highlighting the changing role of religion in society and the need for humans to find new sources of meaning and value in a world that is increasingly secular. Despite these various interpretations, it is clear that Nietzsche's statement had a profound impact on the course of Western philosophy and continues to provoke debate and discussion today. His ideas helped pave the way for existentialism, which emphasizes the importance of individual freedom and responsibility in a world without God, as well as postmodernism, which rejects grand narratives and universal truths in favor of more localized and particular perspectives. Nietzsche's work continues to be influential in various fields, including philosophy, literature, art, and cultural studies. His unique writing style and provocative ideas have made him both a controversial and a highly regarded figure, and his work continues to be studied and debated by scholars and thinkers today. And now we want to hear from you. What do you think Nietzsche was getting at when he said that God is dead? Has religion become less important in your life as it has for many Westerners? Let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss out on any of our future videos. Thanks for watching. The ancient Greek playwright Euripides once wrote that man is the only creature who can escape the path of his nature. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but if you ask me, I think Nietzsche was onto something when he said that we are condemned to be free. The trouble with being free is that nobody teaches us how to handle it. We just suddenly find ourselves capable of making our own decisions, and we have no clue what to do with that power. Nietzsche thought that if we took our freedom seriously, we would realize that we are capable of creating our own values and meaning. But what if we don't want to do that? What if we want to cling to the familiar even though we know it is not good for us? What if we prefer comfort and safety to freedom and authenticity? Like millions of other people, I too am addicted to social media. I spend hours every day scrolling through feeds even though I know it's not good for me. I know that it's hurting my mental health and destroying my attention span, but I can't help myself. I am addicted to instant gratification. And what's worse, I know that there's nothing wrong with that. There's no objective standard of right and wrong. There's no God to tell me what I should or shouldn't do. I am free to make my own choices. But that scares me because what if I choose wrong? What if I decide that comfort and safety are more important than freedom and authenticity? What if I choose to stop fighting? Thank you for watching. I love you. Goodbye. This is one of the most iconic declarations in Western philosophy. Bold, unsettling, and often misinterpreted, Nietzsche was not celebrating atheism or mocking religion. Instead, this postulate represents a cultural and existential turning point in human history. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he wasn't referring to the literal death of a divine being. He was describing the decline of belief in God as the moral, spiritual, and metaphysical foundation of Western civilization. For centuries, Judeo-Christian values provided a framework for meaning, morality, truth, and order. But with the rise of science, secularism, and rational inquiry, Nietzsche observed that society was gradually losing its faith in the divine. The modern age, he claimed, was no longer grounded in sacred absolutes. People continued to speak of morality, purpose, and values, but without belief in the transcendent source that once gave those ideas weight. Thus, Nietzsche's pronouncement is diagnostic, not celebratory. He saw that Western culture had outgrown its religious roots, but had not yet replaced them